Uh, we're back again. My name is Jim Caseman, and what we're doing here for just a few weeks, I don't know how long, my staff talked me into doing 10 minutes a day and talking about my life history and Kathleen's. There was some tape she made before she died. We'll work that in here a little later. And so we closed in the last session talking about how we had moved up to Canada in this charismatic Bible school and living in this 20 by 20 cabin. And somehow this dog got in there, a small dog. And whenever we would pray in the morning and pray, and when we started praying in tongues, the dog went berserk. I mean, crazy. And we'd quit praying in tongues and he'd settle down. And I don't think he was barking in the spirit either. So I don't know how we got rid of the dog. And then, of course, we talked about how we had to walk through the snow to get to the cold shower. All right, so we moved up there in the spring, and in the summertime, I was working at a sawmill just for a few hours a week, very part-time, try to get some money together. I'm still active in the North Dakota Army National Guard, and they were kind enough to allow me to live in Canada and then come back to North Dakota periodically, like for Christmas, and make up for some of the drills. And so that was good income as a captain, and that really helped us. Well, now we went home for Christmas then, and for the month of December. Had a month off for Christmas. And when we got there, we had gotten the word that that in December 3rd, then we got a call from the Lutheran Social Services. We put in for another baby boy. Remember, the first one died before they could get him out of Texas. And they said that we've got your baby boy. Just come and get him. They had flown him in from Texas, of course, again. And so we enjoyed him for a few weeks. And now we're coming up to January 1st. And well, we already noticed at the end of December that he's not feeling well, crying a lot. So finally we took him to the doctor January 1st. And they immediately, well, I guess it would have been January 5th we got to the doctor. And they immediately had to go into surgery. And so the morning of January 6th, 5 in the morning, now we worked all day the day before to find a hospital that would put a 1-month baby to sleep. And we're only an hour away from the capital city, 2 big hospitals, and there was nobody that would do that. So then we, instead of going south to Bismarck, we went, that would have been west an hour, to a small town hospital where they had an anesthesiologist that was willing to put the 1-month baby to sleep. And so then he came out of surgery then at 5 in the morning on the 6th of January. And the doctor, the surgeon, said that Michael won't live past the day, won't live through the day, rather. Well, I never heard any teaching on faith or confession or anything like that. Hadn't even read the whole Bible yet. And still a real baby Christian attending this charismatic Bible school, which really isn't a big help because they would bring in different teachers. For example, water baptism. They'd bring in different teachers. You know, one would teach on immersion, another would teach on sprinkling, and I forget the other way. They had 3 different ways. And so now they said, now you have to decide which is the best way. Well, that's not what I went to Bible school for. I needed to have someone tell me what is the right way from the scriptures. I knew that much. So that was, and that was the way it was in other subjects as well. So it was really not the best place as far as at that point. Now, I'm sure they've changed a lot since then because I think this was the first year of the Bible school, if I remember right, or maybe the second year. But I'm sure they've changed a lot since then. And so then, my confession then, that day, I knew nothing about confession, didn't know anything about faith. My confession was, Michael will not live past noon. Now, the doctor said he wouldn't live past the next day. I said he will not live past noon. So that was my confession all morning long. Michael won't live past noon. Well, he did take his last breath. We were right there in the room with him about 5 minutes after 12. So that was pretty much right on the money. And now, the next issue is we're going to have to be arranging for his burial, and it's not going to be now because it's cold weather, wintertime. And normally people would put the bodies in storage until spring because there was so much work trying to dig through this frozen ground, which could be 30, the frost could go down to 30 inches or more. Some people insisted on doing it so they'd have to burn car tires all night long and everything else to thaw out the ground in order to dig deep enough to get to bury the coffin. So in high school, we had a man by the name of, his last name was Nickish. His father owned the Nickish Funeral Home in my hometown of Wishick. He had two sons go to become undertakers. One took over eventually to practice at Wishick, and the other one, Steve, took over the practice in Bismarck. He started his own funeral home. And so I got a hold of him, and he agreed to keep Michael's body in an inexpensive wooden coffin until spring. And so we made those arrangements. Now, we did have a funeral service before we left and went back to Canada. And of course, I thought lots of people were going to get saved or what have you, you know. And of course, the other thing is we had to figure out how to get his body to Bismarck. I'd had no money for an ambulance or a hearse, but they didn't have ambulances like we do. They had to use a hearse. And we talked to hospital staff into letting us, put Michael in the back seat. And we could take him to Bismarck ourselves, to the funeral home. Well, of course, as we started driving out of town, my wife reaches back and gets his little body, brings him up to the front seat. She's holding him in her lap, and of course we're praying and we're saying, "Oh Lord, you can take all of our children and we'll still serve you." Obviously, we had no teaching on faith or redemption or whatsoever. And so then we took him to Bismarck, took him to the funeral home, and of course then we had the funeral service also in the funeral home, as I recall. And we were thinking a lot of people were going to get saved, but only several people showed up, and they were all friends of ours, born again, spirit-filled, tongue-talking. So, in addition to my in-laws, and I think my parents obviously were there too. But anyway, there wasn't nobody got saved at that funeral, like I thought would. And so we went back to Canada. Well, then the other thing that happened as soon as we got back to Canada, Tisha goes into these convulsions or whatever and passes out. And of course, my wife was a nurse, and it seemed like her breathing stopped, but then my wife had and there was no pulse, but she had a way of kind of looking in the eye or whatever, and however they do that as nurses. And of course, then they had a couple that we'd gotten to know at the Bible school. It was 22 miles to the closest hospital, Rocky Mountain. And so we drove this, little over half-hour drive or more. And of course, they couldn't find out what was wrong with her. And so came back. She was in the hospital there for a few days. Came back. A few weeks later, same thing. Now it's getting closer towards spring now. And she goes to one of these things again and quit breathing or what have you, and didn't know if she was still alive. And of course, we rushed to the hospital. Kathleen, of course, looking in her eye or whatever to do, and discerns there's still a pulse. And got her to the hospital in time. And they still, another week in the hospital, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Well, then we're getting down to, I think it was about another month left of the Bible school for that year. And we just packed up and headed back to the States, headed back to my hometown for Tisha's, trying to figure out what was wrong with her. And went to the doctor, only doctor in town, country town. And he'd had 5 minutes with her. He knew exactly what was wrong with her. She had rheumatic fever. And expound on that just a little bit more in the next session. Meanwhile, be blessed. Amen.